Welcome to Redefining AI on behalf of Squirrel, the Enterprise Gen AI platform. I'm your host, Lauren Hawker Zafer. Now, today we have the privilege of speaking with Faisal Hoque, a distinguished entrepreneur, best-selling author, and globally recognised thought leader. Faisal's career has been dedicated to the intersection of business innovation, leadership, and mindful transformation, guiding individuals and organisations through an era of rapid disruption. Now, his forthcoming book, Transcend, Unlocking Humanity in the Age of AI, delves into how business leaders can harness AI to elevate human potential, foster creativity, and drive sustainable growth while preserving the core values that define us. With a career spanning successful entrepreneurial ventures, collaborations with Fortune 500 companies, and contributions to esteemed institutions like Thinkers 50 and MIT Ideas, Faisal brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our discussion today on redefining AI. So welcome, Faisal, to the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
We choose to sort of select certain components of our guests' achievements. And today we've forefronted some of them, Faisal, but maybe there's something that you want to add to how I've introduced you today in this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you can add, the fact that since we're talking about security and that sort of a thing, I've spent a fair amount of time, almost like eight years in U.S. federal agencies, particularly in DoD and DHS. So I've gotten a unique perspective from working there in terms of security and geopolitical threats, and also local threats from cyber and other point of view. So that's really the only thing So I've had an opportunity to kind of gain experience from early stage companies, which I created myself, but also from trying to scale them and then Fortune 500, but also from the government agencies.
Okay, so now you've started to intrigue us quite a lot. I think you used the phrase a sort of unique perspective of security. How can we interpret that? What does that mean?
Look, I mean, because when you think about security, privacy, and potential disastrous situation that could come from AI, I look at it from, because of my work experience, I look at it from individual, organization, and then from government and geopolitical and geoclimate point of view. So when I worked on Transcend, almost last couple of years, I was looking at both opportunity and challenges, each of those particular audience or types, and how that could shape where do you want to go, but also how do you protect yourself.
Okay. I'm sure we'll get into that further in the conversation, but those 4 posts that you've highlighted, are they interconnected, or what would you say is the emphasis and choice to focus on those particular 4 posts in the context of AI?
It's 100% interconnected. I mean, everything we do on the planet is interconnected, right? As much as sometimes we would like to believe that we're not interconnected, we're very much interconnected. And all those entities, if you want to call them entities, meaning individual, government, businesses, and whatnot, they're absolutely interconnected. Doesn't matter where the innovation, sparks, and how they get scaled, and then how they get distributed, how they get utilized, and what kind of regulation and legislative framework that we're using to guardrail ourselves, all of them are interconnected.
So you've had quite a remarkable career yourself. You started businesses at a young age and you've worked with global brands. Can you share, just so that we can understand a little bit of your own journey? I know that's always fascinating for listeners to understand, what was the journey? Can you share some pivotal moments that really shaped your path as like an entrepreneur and a thought leader?
Sure. I mean, look, so I originally come from Bangladesh. I left home at the age of 19, came to US to go to school. And my senior year, I developed this back-end middleware software to extract data of what then used to be the mainframe and fax and bring it on the desktop. And I kind of used that to get a commercial job, because I was always broke in school, coming from Bangladesh and not having any money. And I actually, my very first job was a graveyard shift, what they call janitorial engineering, which is a fancy name of being a janitor. So I was desperate to get out of the school and get into the workforce. So the way I did that is I came up with a product and I wanted to kind of showcase the product. And as a result, I started my career in Pitney Bowes in their R&D organization. Pitney Bowes happens to be in Connecticut. And they, at that time, was part of Fortune 500, and since then they declined. After working there a couple of years, ended up working in Dun& Bradstreet. Right after Dun& Bradstreet, I started my first company where it was in middleware software business, and I got Chase Manhattan Bank as my first customer. And from there, I exited, created next company, ended up going to G Capital because I had a company that was focused on this internet network level technology that could do data passing through messaging pretty quickly. And so I ended up being part of GE Capital's business that launched the first internet business-to-business commerce platform. Those days, browser was just coming out. Netscape just announced their browser. So we're talking about very early days of modern information revolution as we know. So, and since then, I have had several companies. Some of them were very successful. A couple of them are very disastrous, where I lost my shirt and got fired from my own company at some point. But over the years, I managed to also work with some of the best brand because of what I was bringing with my innovation. So I ended up working with Pepsi, Northrop Grumman, French Social Security Service, BNP Paribas in Europe, et cetera, et cetera. And then last 8 years or so, I've been also working with U.S. government, the DoD and DHS. And, 20 years ago, this is now really 20 years ago, my first book, which was published, actually longer than that, published in 2000 by Cambridge University Press, where I was arguing that technology really doesn't mean a whole lot if you can't really figure out the value and the business model that it's trying to enable, right? So, and since then, I got very involved with academia, ended up writing several books. Transcend would be my 10th book. And I've done a lot of research on utilization of technology and the transformational path that requires cultural change and change management and management practices, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been, it's been quite a bit of learning process with lots of collaboration with very unique and very smart people from all sectors. And obviously, just like anybody else's life, I have faced a number of personal adversity. All my book proceeds goes to cancer research because I have a cancer surviving son. So my interest in AI also, by the way, is it peaked because of the application of AI in healthcare and what it can do for quality of patient diagnosis and drug discovery utilizing AI as a platform.
Wow, fascinating. So many things that you've accomplished and achieved. If we look at what has triggered your spark in AI, but not only that, it seems like you have had a life that has been intertwined with technology. Not only 10 books, but the points that you've mentioned in terms of your sort of adventures or engagement with software itself. If you had to give someone maybe one piece of advice around especially the component of value and business model or module when it comes to software and technology, what would that one piece of advice be?
I would say that don't chase the fad, try to solve real problem. And real problem, it may be harder, it may take longer, but there's a tremendous satisfaction both from the trying to solve the problem, but also when it actually does something, the value it creates. You may not be the most successful entrepreneur, you may not become an overnight success, but the satisfaction of solving complex problem is quite meaningful, at least to me. So I kind of try to tell people that try to focus on some complex and real problem, not just whatever is out there and chasing the fad.
So how can you validate that something is a problem, though? I mean, my interpretation might lie in subjectivity of I identify this as a problem.
Absolutely. And it is individualistic, right? So, and usually the problem, if you talk about entrepreneurial journey, the problems are identified by the entrepreneur. Usually usually because they have encountered something in their own journey. And maybe they tried to do something and it didn't work, or they saw an opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no value judgment. I'm not making any value judgment by saying, hey, your solution that you're pursuing is less meaningful because that's your forte, that's your interest. Whatever it sings to you, if I can use that word, that's what you should be pursuing. But what I mean by, complex problem, because the world has so many problems. I mean, healthcare, climate, geopolitical, security, et cetera, et cetera. Pick anything and do deep work in that, whatever you're picking. Just don't focus on the superficial stuff. And because at the end of the day, that doesn't pan off. And we've seen that time and time again. We saw that during the internet bubble. And I'm sure we're going to see that even in AI, because I think that we are on the cusp of similar kind of, maybe even more so than when, the browser and internet kind of emerged in the marketplace.
I would, and I don't want to go into an agreement in that particular point just yet, but I think that there's some truth in that. And how have you identified or associated your own identification with what you've just said as well? Like, what have you interpreted about where we are in this particular age of AI? I mean, if you look at your books, Transcend, Unlocking Humanity in the Age of AI, so obviously you've done a lot of sort of discovery around where we are in AI at the moment. What would you answer to that, and what do you want readers to take away from Transcend as well?
Look, I mean, there's like two opposite spectrum, and there's some middle ground, right? So I mean, there's like extreme optimism that AI is the answer to anything and everything, and there's this Luddites who feels that it's just it's just another thing, and it will destroy us and kill us. And I think that where it will go will depend on what humanity does in the next 3, 5, 10 years. So I have kind of taken that middle path, and that also kind of tied into my philosophical belief in a lot of Eastern philosophical tenet, that middle path is kind of, where you're not completely devoted, but you're not also completely detached. You're kind of in the middle path, right? Middle way of looking at things. So from that perspective, it has tremendous opportunity to impact every sector of humanity, whether that's healthcare, whether that's productivity, whether that's creativity, et cetera, et cetera. But it also creates a lot of threats, like, deep fake, identity, stolen identity, the whole notion of geopolitical unrest. It can do all kind of stuff, right? So the way I looked at it, that, and actually I described a framework called Open and another framework called Care. Open is that you have to be open to possibilities, and Open has particular steps. How do you look at opportunity, and how do you come up with the innovation portfolio and then drive towards creating meaningful innovation with AI that's very personalized to you, to your organization, whatever the case may be. And Care is the governance model that allows you to kind of look at it. Okay, what is the most catastrophic scenario that you can come up with, and how do you guide through that so that you're establishing proper guardrail and governance model. So Care, the first step of Care is coming up with the catastrophic scenarios, right? So I kind of looked at it, very pragmatic, and tried to look at it a very pragmatic and balanced perspective. I am a technologist. I will always be enthusiastic about technologies, but I've also, been cautious because of the work experience I have had in small, large, and government sector, and it's a collective responsibility. How do we go about applying this stuff in reality and in our daily life, but also where it ends up being, because AI will be, at the end of the day, mirror of humanity, because it has only one data source, which is humanity. So whatever we're feeding it, that's what's going to give it back to us.
Yes. So if we look at the two frameworks that you've mentioned, the Open and the Care framework, the Open one is really, from what I've understood, there to help businesses unlock AI and look at the potential for growth. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's absolutely correct. So, at a very high level, it basically looks at it, okay, you come up with art of possibilities, and then you kind of see, okay, what's feasible, and come up with a portfolio of opportunities, and you rack and stack those opportunities in terms of the highest impact, and you define what the highest impact is for you or the organization or whatever. And then you go through an execution model so that you can execute it. And the care model is you overlay the care model whereby you're governing it and you're guiding it with ethics, with legislation, and with the eye towards that, well, how much is too much? Where do we stop? And what is that? Where is it that it's going to end up where we are really adding value versus causing harm, right? And as you know, that in leadership and management, the conversation kind of shifted from used to be how do we sustain innovation, and then we started talking about how do we make sustainable so that it actually have an impact in ecosystem and planet and et cetera, et cetera. So we actually have this in a care model, we talk about these 4 Ps, which is planet, profit, product, and people kind of mindset. But also, we're kind of moving towards that we have to regenerate to protect the humanity, right? And to add value, because we're increasingly, faced with limited resources. So we have to regenerate collective resources that allows us to do better than what we are today.
Yeah, it's a really interesting points that you're making there, which actually leads me to maybe think on a sidetrack of, if we look at and you're talking about like trying to balance the opportunities with the risks as well. And it reminds me of a conversation when you're looking at like sustainable chocolate production, actually, and when you're trying to change how chocolate's produced because you want to make sure that, there's no child labor, that, things are really done properly. Do you see any parallel with AI, like the commercial aspect of how AI could be over-commercialized, and what would be the risk in a similar sort of scenario?
100%. Look what's already happening, right? A huge part of the book is philosophy, because, we're gradually basically outsourcing ourselves, right? And it's if you define, okay, you have to go to a very fundamental level. What is humanity? Humanity is about freedom and love. It boils down to those couple of things, right? Freedom meaning the freedom to pursue our creative pursuit or the way we want to live and the way we define happiness, that sort of a thing. And so if you say, look, I'm going to have a AI-enabled robot cook for me, and I'm going to have a self-driving car drive me, and I'm going to have ChatGPT write me an email, and I'm going to have Claude write me an article, you're basically gradually outsourcing yourself. And what the harm to that is that you're basically giving up your critical thinking process, right? And it's actually I'm more concerned about the next generation, because we're kind of growing up with it, so we still will maintain that human agency, but the next generation will have less opportunity because it's easier. Like, imagine a child looking bunch of Legos on the floor and taking a phone and have an app that tells you what can you build with it, versus when we grew up, or even when my son grew up, 19 years ago, he would figure out he would have this imaginative idea what he or she can build with that, right? So those are the psychological and human aspect that we have to be very cautious about, right? Now, you can take it to the other extreme, whereby saying, okay, humanity is a very distractive species, and we do enormous amount of harm to each other for personal gain or whatever. That's part of humanity. And so we also are pushing boundaries, how many ways we can protect, but also destroy each other, right? So you can also see to a point where you can also imagine that it may come to a point where we're just self-destructed ourselves, and AI has taken over, because if it's already 1,000 times smarter than us, because you and I are just individual. It's loaded with thousands of us thought process, and it's generating ideas and whatever from it. So you can really create dark scenarios, and it's already happening. You see that whole population getting manipulated with a certain type of messaging. People are, You talk about identity theft and deep fake. You're being manipulated. You're forced to buy things because you think that you like it because the algorithm is treating you that way. You're watching certain shows because you're being told that this is the show that you'd be seeing. So there's a gradual effect happening, but as we do this over commercialization, as you said, you gave that example of chocolate, and there are also companies like look at Hershey's that trying to do this eco-friendly cocoa collection and whatnot, right? So we have to start thinking similar way, and that's why I said that you have to change your mindset from sustainability to regenerative. And regenerative meaning not regeneration of technology, but regeneration of human agency and human faculty.
Yeah, it's a key word as well, like human agency at the moment. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. I think that our audience are really, I'm convinced that they will have enjoyed this episode as much as I have. I encourage everyone that's came on this journey with us today to check out Faisal's book, which is Transcend. And yeah, thank you very much for being part of this conversation. Thank you, Faisal.
Thank you for having me.